Under the pale gray sky of a major city on the east coast of the United States, glass buildings rose cold and tall, blotting out the true color of the sky. The blare of car horns, the hum of air conditioners, and the glow of electric lights through the night had become the city's heartbeat. There were no fields, no gardens, only concrete, power lines, and bare balconies without a trace of green. On the rooftops, instead of flowers, stood vast cooling systems and giant ventilation ducts. Ethan, a young architect, lived alone on the top floor of an old apartment building. Each morning, when he pulled back the curtains, all he could see were reflections of glass panes and thick layers of exhaust fumes, forming a heavy mist below. In his childhood memories, there had once been a small garden where he lived with his grandmother, where bees buzzed around lavender, and the scent of fresh grass filled the air each summer. But now, those memories were a luxury in a world racing to the rhythm of industry. One day, as he stood on his narrow balcony, Ethan looked down at the hurried crowds and suddenly asked himself, why can't there be flowers, bees, life, right here in the city? The question echoed in his mind like a quiet, persistent knock. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen a real bee. In the city, flowers only existed as plastic displays, in shopping malls, or background images on phones. The city had grown taller, faster, but it seemed to have forgotten the smallest things: the color green, the hum of wings, and the breath of nature. And in that very moment, amid the concrete, Ethan felt something stir within him. If life could no longer find its way in, perhaps it was time for him to start planting it right, where no one believed it could bloom. Under a rare sliver of morning sunlight slicing between towering glass buildings, Ethan began his work not with a new blueprint or a sleek architectural rendering, but with scraps of wood and a few bags of soil. The tiny balcony of his high-rise apartment became the launchpad for a bold dream, a garden wall in the heart of concrete. He carefully mounted each recycled wooden block onto the wall, forming vertical planting slots. Each box was a tiny patch of soil where Ethan sowed seeds of lavender, wild daisies, and mint flowers that had been part of his childhood. In the corner, he added clusters of hollow bamboo tubes, stacked like a handmade beehive, hoping that one day real bees might stop by. He did everything with his own hands, no hired workers, no machinery. Just one person and one belief: that flowers could bloom through concrete if someone dared to plant them. Ethan captured each step and shared it on social media with the hashtag number Honeywall. Within days, his post spread faster than he had expected. Young people from other cities messaged him asking for instructions. Teachers wanted to bring the idea into their schools. An elderly woman sent a teary message, simply to say, "Thank you for reminding us of something we thought was lost." But not all responses were positive. Some residents in the building began to complain. They posted in the community group, "Bees will sting the kids. Pollen causes allergies. The wall of flowers looks messy ruins the aesthetics." Ethan read those comments in silence. At times, he felt disheartened not by the opposition itself, but by the realization that fear had made people forget how beautiful these things once were. But then he looked up at the little wooden frame, where fresh green shoots had just emerged, their tiny leaves trembling in the breeze. He knew that even a single sprout was a responsive, quiet affirmation that nature hadn't abandoned people. It was simply waiting to be listened to and welcomed back. So he continued, with his hands, with his heart, because Ethan believed if flowers bloomed, the bees would come. And if the bees returned, life would begin again, even from just one small balcony. The city sky grew heavier each day, not from clouds, but from wary glances, tense meetings, and cautiously worded refusals. A week after Ethan's number Honeywall project began gaining traction online, he received a formal summons from the neighborhood council. At the meeting, stern faces barely concealed their concern. What if a child gets stung? What if someone has a serious allergy? And who will be responsible if the hive spreads to other balconies? Ethan stood there, absorbing each question like blades slicing into his hopes. He tried to explain about gentle native bee species that don't sting, about the importance of pollination, about sustainable ecosystems. But his words seemed to slip past the walls of worry and regulation, unheard. Finally, the council reached a decision: temporarily halt the project, request the removal of part of the flower wall and the artificial beehive. That afternoon, Ethan climbed a ladder and began removing each bamboo tube, each tray of soil, as if peeling dreams off the wall, one by one. No one came to help. Only the wind, the sun, and a few flower petals drifting down with every sigh. But Ethan didn't give up. That night, under the soft yellow light, he sat down and wrote a long, handwritten letter more than 3 pages addressed to the council, to the local newspaper, and to several environmental groups. In the letter, he cited scientific documents, referenced urban vertical garden models from Europe, and included pictures of children beaming with joy at the first flower blooming on a brick wall. "I'm not trying to create risks," Ethan wrote. "I'm just trying to replant life, something this city lost a long time ago." Even though he was asked to stop, Ethan still cared for the flowers every morning. Even when no one stood by his side, he quietly continued to record his environmental journal every evening. Temperature, humidity, the first petals to bloom, a strange insect stopping by. Was he lonely? Yes. Heartbroken? Very much so. But he knew life doesn't need applause to begin. It only needs one person brave enough to sow the seed, and a heart steadfast enough not to give up, even when left completely alone. One early autumn morning, when the city still slumbered in its cold concrete dream, Ethan stepped onto his balcony, as usual, watering can in hand, eyes lowered to check the moisture of the soil inside his vertical planters. The soft sunlight bathed the pale lavender petals, making everything feel peacefully still. Then he heard it, a faint sound, delicate but unmistakably a gentle hum of wings. Ethan looked up. In the air, a tiny silhouette hovered. A real bee, its iridescent wings catching the sunlight, was circling a lavender bloom. He didn't dare breathe. His heart paused in that momentum moment he had waited months of solitude to experience. "You found them," Ethan whispered to himself. Or, "They found you." The bee continued to fly slowly, then landed on the flower. Not a robot, not a model, a living creature, a true messenger of nature who had found its way back through the urban sky. Tears welled up. Ethan reached for his phone and began recording. He didn't say anything in the video, just the image of a small bee, the soft sound of the wind, and the shining eyes of a man who had just touched a mirror. The video was titled, "The Day Bees Return to the City." Hashtags: number Honeywall, number Bees Airback, number Urban Hope. He posted it on social media, not expecting much. But the next morning, his phone lit up with non-stop notifications. The clip had been shared hundreds of times. Some people wrote, "I never thought I'd see real bees in the city again. Thank you for not giving up. We want to join you." A few curious neighbors stopped by. A little boy pulled his mother onto their balcony and asked, "Mom, are those real bees?" A woman who had once opposed the project stepped gently up to the wall of flowers, gazed at the trays, and softly said, "It's really beautiful." From a single bee, a spark of hope was lit high among the towers. From Ethan's balcony, life began to pulse gently back toward the city. Quietly, but surely. That once small balcony was no longer just Ethan's private space. It became a gathering place where kids brought old plastic pots to plant wild daisies, where adults knocked on the door to borrow scissors, ask about clean soil, or learn how to make compost water from kitchen scraps. More than anything, it became the heart of a growing story, the honey wall, spreading not through loudspeakers, but through hearts. One late afternoon, as Ethan sat trimming dried blossoms, a young girl knocked on the door. In her hands was a small tin box. Inside were a few seeds and a folded piece of paper. "I want to plant flowers for the bees. There's not much sun on the 12th floor, but I'll try." Ethan smiled and gently took the box, replying, "You just planted something even more important than flower show." The word spread quickly. On social media, the hashtag number Honeywall was no longer just pictures of Ethan's balcony. People began posting photos of homemade flower pots, kids showing off paper beehives, and adults snapping selfies with the first real bee they'd ever seen. One morning, Laylath's neighbor who ran a small home bakery knocked on Ethan's door, holding a tray of golden honey cakes. "I never thought I'd get to make real city honey cake," she laughed. "Until now, it's always been artificial syrup. For the first time, I can say, made from real bees in a real city." Ethan was surprised, touched. Those first drops of honey from the natural hive were no longer just a biological achievement. They were part of a new memory being woven in the heart of a hardened urban world. In response to the growing interest, Ethan hosted a small rooftop workshop. No whiteboards, no slide decks, just wooden planks, bamboo tubes, a few bags of seeds, and one handwritten sign: "Building a home for life." He taught children how to tell the difference between real bees and robotic ones. He showed adults how to use light traps to attract pollinators. But most of all, he taught them how to listen to nature again with their hearts. From Ethan's quiet dream, an entire community was now helping write the next chapter. A wall full of flowers, bees, and hope sprouting not only from the soil, but from the human heart. The article appeared one Monday morning, quiet, yet resounding. On the cover was a photo of the 15th floor balcony bursting with color, with bamboo tubes welcoming bees. Across the top was the headline, "The Honey Wall, when life begins with a single window." The local newspaper, which rarely featured soft stories about flowers and bees, dedicated 2 full pages to Ethan, the young architect, with a small dream, a small balcony, and a surprisingly large impact. That same week, city officials knocked on the door of apartment 15B, but they weren't there to shut things down. They came with an invitation. Ethan was asked to speak at an urban green architecture forum, an official invitation offered with respect. Ethan sat on a makeshift wooden stage at the community center, holding a small lavender pot in his hand, saw symbol of the greatest lesson he had learned. Life doesn't need a vast garden. It just needs a window willing to open. He didn't speak in technical jargon, nor did he cite complex architectural theories. He simply told the story of his little balcony, the first bee's return, and the look in a child's eyes when hearing a real buzz for the first time. His talk ended in a long round of applause, not for academic brilliance, but for the simple truth it carried. Everyone wants to live in a city that knows how to breathe. Within a month, buildings across the neighborhood began piloting the Calling Bee Green Wall concept. The fear once surrounding bees gave way to curiosity and admiration. People started seeing bees not as threats, but as messengers of hope. A residential block installed bamboo tubes on its rooftop to host wild bees. An elementary school built a wing garden where children planted flowers and wrote letters to the bees. A coffee shop hung baskets of flowers on its balcony with a small sign, "Every flower is an invitation, every bee a reply." Ethan stood on his own balcony, gazing down at the city. Dots of green began to stretch across rooftops and balconies like sparks of light flickering through a cement mist. He was no longer alone. The Honey Wallons, a quiet corner, had now become a green movement, spreading not with cement, but with the belief that a window opened to life could open a future. As sunset cast its golden glow over the high rises of a city long accustomed to glass and smoke, something felt different. Among the worn-out grays of concrete, a new shade of green was quietly returning, creeping vines curling near windows, lavender pots nestled beneath balconies, slanted bamboo tubes gently swaying, waiting for a bee to find its way home. It all began when Ethan presented his proposal at the neighborhood community meeting. Roof for bees, a home for bees, a home for hope. The blueprint didn't promise anything grand or unattainable. It simply offered a humble, human vision: transform the rooftops of apartment buildings into small ecological havens, places where bees could find shelter, where people could rest, and where nature could learn to breathe again amid the urban jungle. No one hesitated. The elderly men who once only gathered for chess now discussed rooftop gardening. Young mothers exchanged seeds and clean soil, then guided their children up to the rooftop, planting seeds one by one along the railing beds. The youth mapped out a green corridor bee pathways stretching across rooftops, through vine-covered trellises, connecting each life point into a living aerial ecosystem. On old brick walls, flowering vines were planted. Behind bakery signs, bookstore corners, coffee shop, wall small bee boxes crafted from reclaimed wood were tucked away, carefully and discreetly designed. Even the parking lotants, a symbol of dust and smoke, transformed. Along its lanes, tiny flower beds bloomed, black-eyed Susans, salvias, mints, forming an underground garden, only visible to those who took the time to look down a quiet message. Sometimes, life hides beneath the most ordinary things. And so, the city began to change its color, not through media campaigns, not by top-down orders, but by quiet hands, by hearts that remembered how to slow down. Ethan walked through the rooftop garden now, a gathering place for bees, for people, for a dream of a city that lives with nature, not just on it. And amid the gentle hum of bees weaving between rooftops and the delighted squeals of children spotting a new sprout, Ethan realized, a dream, when held long enough, can change an entire city. One spring morning, golden sunlight danced across rooftops, glistening on dewdrops resting on lavender petals. Ethan stood on his high-rise balcony, the very place where it had all begun. From here, he looked out over the city, once a cold mass of concrete, now dotted with patches of green, like veins of life awakening again. There were no more monotonous car horns or the whistling wind trapped between glass towers. Floating in the air now was a familiar sound, the gentle hum of bees drifting across balconies, awnings, and trellises clinging to walls. Perhaps the city had never felt so whole. Ethan stepped closer to the honey wall, once a point of contention, once partially dismantled, once home to nothing more than a fragile dream buried in smog. Now it bloomed, with flowers, with bees, with sunshine and the laughter of children echoing from rooftops near and far. He took out a small wooden plaque, hand-carved and smoothed by care, and gently affixed it between the honeycomb boxes on the wall. Engraved on the plaque were the words, "We don't need to escape the city to find nature. We just need to invite her home. We don't have to leave the city to find nature. We just need to open our hearts so she has a reason to return." Down below, in the little pocket gardens scattered throughout the city, children ran about with notebooks in hand, jotting down observations on flowers and bees. An elderly man gently showed a young girl how to tell the difference between a honeybee and a worker bee. A young couple knelt beside a traffic pole, planting seeds around its base and calling it their circle of hope. Ethan leaned against the railing, quietly watching. He no longer felt the solitude that once defined the beginning of his journey. The city hadn't just changed in color or sounded, had changed in the rhythm of the hearts beating within it. You don't need to be a great architect. You don't need a massive campaign. All it takes is a balcony, an idea, a little belief, and a dream that knows how to hold on. In a place once known as the city without bees, nature had finally been invited home. And that small dream had blossomed. If this story touched your heart, like this video to give strength to those who continue to sow hope in small balconies, in forgotten gardens, and across rooftops filled with bees and blooms. Share to spread the message. Nature isn't far, she just needs to be welcomed back. Subscribe to our channel to keep following heartfelt stories about people, nature, and the quiet power of small, authentic acts. And turn on notifications so you never miss a video where every petal, every gentle buzz is a soft reminder that life is still waiting for us to listen. Siversheim on Kreven.